the AI6 podcast with Joanne Sweeney.
Sean Carroll, thank you so much for joining me on the AI6 podcast. You are coming to us from Washington at the moment because you're traveling. You're very welcome.
Yes. Being in the birthplace of the United States on the 250th anniversary, it's an exciting place to be. But not as exciting as being here with you, Joanne. So thank you for having me.
Well, my pleasure. Introduce yourself, first of all, to our listeners.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Carroll. I am a United States Marine. I'm a retired police officer and commander from Providence, Rhode Island. And I am also a leadership coach, consultant, and keynote speaker.
And like the rest of us, Sean, you have now entered the world of artificial intelligence because it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. We can't ignore it. But as a career-long law enforcement officer and working in leadership, what's your impression of the world now around us and AI?
It's changed everything. I mean, it really has changed the foundation of society. And as much as it's still getting its footing, in my opinion, it's clearly changed the game. I mean, now, even as I walk around, I see people talking about it all day long. They're talking to their phone. It's just changed everything. And it makes me think back to, dating myself, being a kid watching the Jetsons cartoon, of all those things that have come full circle in our lifetime. And I can only imagine what's going to happen in the next 10 or so as we just continue to improve exponentially on this technology.
And, law enforcement, like other disciplines and sectors of society, have had to evolve over recent decades with the arrival of the internet, the smartphone, social media, and you absolutely embraced it, didn't you?
I did. I was, like anyone else, it was scary at first. You're not familiar with it. It doesn't really make sense. But the thing that really struck me, and it's funny because listening to you actually made me feel a lot more comfortable with it. And when you were talking with Steve Morreale, and I said, I got to get on board with this because, especially him, he was a mentor to me. I was very fortunate to be able to now work with him. And I said, man, if this guy's doing it, I got to be able to do this too. And it was funny how it all worked out to get me here to you today.
Yeah. And I always say domain expertise plus artificial intelligence is how we approach it. So I would never go into AI and ask about biochemistry because I know absolutely nothing about it. And so I would go rogue. The AI might go rogue, and together we would go rogue. We stay in our own lane of expertise, and then we can bring our critical judgment. And if I said to you, Sean, do you have the capability to train a junior in everything that you know? You'd say absolutely. Your AI is your junior, right?
Right. And it's interesting because I think you had made a lot of commentary about this, and it's not about coding, it's about communication. And it's the one thing that I learned was, I'll be honest with you, when I first started, I had an awful experience with AI. I started using one particular application and it was doing all the things that you hear about. It was hallucinating, it was giving me wrong answers, it was not doing what I wanted it to do. And there were a couple of reasons for that, but the biggest one that I learned pretty quickly is garbage in, garbage out. The thing can't read your mind, so you have to literally, the secret to me, at least at my level so far, is be able to put the proper prompt in, and take the time to give it the background, give it the context, tell it all the details that it needs to know in order for it to be able to do what it needs to do. And the more that I leaned into that and creating better prompts and taking the time at the beginning, it shaved exponential amount of time off the back end, because what I found was I would just kind of throw something in there really quick to start. And then I would spend all of my time revising, updating, correcting, as opposed to just taking a couple extra minutes at the beginning, giving it everything it needs. And now it's only minor tweaks. So I don't know if you've had the same experience.
Yeah, and absolutely. I see it all the time when I'm in classrooms and training people. They're going in with the very short, quick prompt, give me this. And I'm like, guys, it's going to underperform. If you were onboarding a new staff member, you wouldn't give them that level of attention. And if you want to get time back from AI, you've got to give it the time. How are your colleagues in law enforcement responding to this massive challenge? Some might be coming to the end of their career feeling, do I have the energy to learn this new discipline, this new technology? You have young ones coming in who are digital and AI natives and who, are using it anyway. So it's quite a transformation, isn't it, for people?
It really is. And I mean, to be plain, at least in the United States for sure, it's coming. So whether you wanted to or not. And I think a lot of people that might have been resistant to it at first, like anything else, right? It's unfamiliar, it's new, it seems a little wild when you're not familiar with that technology. It really it's something that you may not necessarily lean into for the older generation, but I will say this, I'm thinking back to, my department, unfortunately had to respond to the mass shooting at Brown University right before Christmas last year. And that became a really big component with the flock cameras, the Tesla cars that were recording things, like all of those AI, if you want to call them that, AI elements really were really important. I mean, that's even how they wound up finding the individual was through a plate reader was part of that. So, all of these technologies, even if you're resistant to them, I think it forces your hand because when that becomes the only way that you can move forward on some of these really important cases, you don't have a choice, right? If that's all you've got. And quite frankly, what's the other side of that coin, Joanne? You don't use it, you don't solve a crime, and now what? All for what reason? So I think it also helps too to have the younger generation, like you said, that's very fluent in it. Because as much as we laugh, I mean, I remember still being a commanding officer and having young officers that were when TikTok was still becoming a thing. And, I thought it was a breath mint. I didn't know what this tic tac, whatever it is. And so all these guys, but that's how these guys and girls, that's how they were communicating. And they were very comfortable with that. So for me, even though I didn't know what I was doing, if I had to do something, I'd be like, hey, come show me how this works. And, and they would get right in there. And it actually worked out because it allowed me to create a better bond with them as I learned from them because, that's the thing, right? Somebody that's senior to you that is one of your commanding officers is like, hey, help me do this. So they're really proud to show off their AI prowess and all the technology that they are comfortable with. And it also made me feel a little more comfortable as well because to watch somebody that's fluent in it just rip right through and go, okay, this isn't that scary after all. It also doesn't hurt that I have two kids that are in that age too. So that's, how that works, right? Hey, how do I do this, on my phone? And they're amazing resources. So it's been a lot easier. But to answer your question, I don't think it's a matter of whether you want to do it or not. I think it's a matter of when your hand gets forced. So why not embrace it, use it for what what it's useful for in order to improve the level of service. Because the other thing too, Joanne, right, as you know, I'm sure it's the same in over where you are on the other side of the pond. Right now, manpower shortages, staffing shortages are huge. So the ability to leverage this technology, whether it's through drones, whether it's through plate reader cameras, whatever the technology is, even report writing, all of those things make forces more efficient. They make officers more productive, and they effectively reduce more crime and help use less taxpayer dollars in order to do those things. So I don't think it's really a matter of whether you want to or not. It's a matter of when you're going to get on board, because at the end of the day, it's only going to bring good things for everybody involved.
Yeah, you cannot argue with the statement AI for public good because that's exactly the side of the fence that you are on. And that's a vocation and policing and law enforcement that you choose is for public good and to protect and serve. And so that's a really strong argument to present to colleagues who have that nervousness and reluctance. Remember, technology can be used at ill by anyone. And in fact, the cyber criminals are so proficient in this technology. So we need our law enforcement officers to catch up. How are you mentoring and coaching colleagues now in that line of work where you are?
Well, it's funny that you asked that because we have this conversation quite a bit, not necessarily specifically about AI, but it just inevitably comes up in conversation. And, the one thing for me that really resonated with me and really helped me lean in when I first got that friction point where it wasn't working for me the way I wanted was hearing people repeatedly talk about leveraging their time. And for someone like me, and I'm sure for you, that's a huge variable, right? We're so busy, we have so many things going on. So even if I can just find a way to shave 5 or 10 minutes off a task or maybe more, that those, for just administrative things, those are the types of things that really change the game. And it's ironic that I was just talking to somebody recently about, I've expanded now into keynote speaking, and I needed to create a keynote speaking website. So I went on to my AI and I said, hey, here's my information. What do you got? And it whiz-bird, it spits out this thing. I literally copy and paste it into a website, and Shazam, SeanCarrollSpeaks.com is alive. And I actually have left it up and I have not touched it. So if anybody wants to check it out, you can see exactly what it created. The only addition that I made was it asked me for a photo that it didn't have to plug in. So that went live, and it's incredible. It's incredible to see the power of what it can do when used properly. And for someone like me, I mean, it's funny because my company is AIO Consulting. It stands for Adapt, Improvise, Overcome, which, by the way, I was around long before AI became a thing. Okay, so no play on words there. But it was kind of ironic because that, to me, that is the definition of what AIO is about, right? I ran into a problem. I'm not a tech guy. I can just about spell IT. So how do I create a website when I'm dragging my knuckles on the ground? So to have the ability to create something like that, instead of having to take weeks to pay somebody thousands of dollars and go through how many iterations of change this, put that there, it was just really, really amazing. And I thought that was a really wild experiment and kind of ironic that I would do that right before I talked to you.
Yeah, and keep experimenting. One thing I ask, students and anyone that I'm working with, you need to push the boundaries of AI capability because it can do more than what you think. How are you taking AI or facets of it now into your keynote speaking when you're getting on stages? Is there any thread of AI in what you're delivering?
It's sure. I mean, because for me, what really I have been able to leverage in my personal and professional career is just in cases like that is the research portion, because I take a lot of pride in customizing my message to the audience. So even down to the geography of where I am, the history of the place that's there, because I want to show people that I'm investing the time in each individual audience. What I do is unique. Every single thing is like an Eggo waffle. They're all different from the next. But I do that not only to show my investment in the audience, but also to keep it interesting for me. So when I have to sit there and do that type of research, to be able to just type a couple sentences and then it just spits out all the stuff. And a lot of times it gives me things that I may not have ever even found on my own. It really, really is just, and I'm only using it. I mean, I'm sure on the surface, that's just the very beginning, the tip of the iceberg, as it were, is just being able to do research and such. When I wrote my book, it was a huge, huge, huge savings of time and all, just double checking, making sure that I have data points right and metrics and quotes and, sources are verified. Again, just those administrative tasks, even that for someone like me is a huge, huge component. I mean, I shaved months off the time before I was able to get that book out there on Amazon. So it really is a game changer. And quite frankly, I don't even know that I may have pursued some of the projects that I've pursued because I would have felt they were too overwhelming. It's just going to take too much time. I don't have that kind of time. I'm doing too many other things. So it really has opened up a lot of doors to opportunities for me to be able to change people's lives because now I can do more things with less time.
And that's the currency that we all want more of is time. It's the currency that says, money can't buy you time. But sometimes if you've got money, you can hire people. But this is the point. I also have found that the projects that I have started, completed, and advanced in the last 3 years is absolutely down to artificial intelligence. And I feel so fortunate that I get to live through history and be a part of it because I wouldn't have had the skill set, the money, the time, the capability. And like you said, I can't do it. So you wouldn't even start because you would not be able to see the finish line. And that's a really important message that I want people to take away. All of the ideas that you've had or something that's burning, now you can try it. And you talked about creating the copy for your website. I would encourage people to vibe code your idea. And one question I wanted to ask you is, you know, you've got young officers coming into police forces right across the United States. They don't have your experience. They've not had those frontline major public emergencies that you have faced, that you've lived through, that you now have the benefit of the unfortunate experiences. AI can't replicate those lived experiences. They can do, role playing, scenario playing, tell them the history of what happened. But something that decade long career professionals like you and your colleagues have is you have lived experience. And that's something that you could give to AI, but also to give to your own AI model. So where I'm going with this long preamble is, would you ever consider cloning your experience or training a model of your own with everything that you've lived through in your professional career?
That's a great question. I sure would. I'm a little apprehensive only because I don't know a whole lot about it. But I saw one recently. A colleague of mine has a website like that, and I didn't really talk to them about the nuts and bolts of how they did it. But that they have like a chat bot basically, and you can go in and ask that question. And I guess I'm assuming they've probably uploaded hours of audio or video or whatever, a written information. And the interesting part was the first time I heard about this was a couple years ago, and it was a reporter. His father was dying, and he did a series of interviews with his father before he passed away. And after his father died, he uploaded all that audio into an AI platform, and now he has like daily conversations. And I remember at the time, for me personally, that's a little weird. My father died young, and as much as I would give anything to have another conversation with him, that just seemed a little odd to me, and it wasn't quite up my alley. But as I think forward now, the reason why I'm like thinking out loud as we're talking about this is because for me, that really is my passion. My passion is paying it forward to the next generation. And the interesting part is, as much as AI can take all of my experiences and help me repackage them in a way that really helps people, it can't take the place of the 30 plus years of being a Marine, being a big city cop, being an FBI NAA trainer, all the experiences, like you said, that have made my Irish upbringing. Of course, it wouldn't be complete without all the trials and tribulations that come with life. But that's how we get here. So I wouldn't say no, and I'm not necessarily saying yes. I think I would need to learn a little bit more. But as we get a little further along and I get more comfortable, I would. The only reason that I hesitate is because I think about those experiences that I had at the beginning where, if I'm putting my name on something and somebody like hypothetically goes on to the Sean Carroll leadership chatbot, would that necessarily give the answer that I would give? I think it would probably depend on how much data is there for it to reference. I'm sure that's a huge variable. It's really interesting, I'll tell you that. But I don't know at the end of the day that the AI will replace the human experience. And I think that's the difference. Is as great as it is, you're not going to put a robot in front of a room and be able to make the connection that I can make when I'm talking to an audience, when I'm sharing my stories of things that happened to me. And that's really what I'm about, is to take that experience and allow people not just to hear a story, but to be empowered by that, to be transformed by that. So they're not just getting information, they're getting transformation. And as much as AI is good at repackaging it, it can't create something that it doesn't have.
No. And I genuinely think that the more technology that we are given and that we have access to and utilize in our personal and professional lives, I think the more we crave that human connection, because we are reminded that the technology will never shut off. So then our nervous system and our brains don't shut off. But what we're missing is that human to human connection.
Right.
The United States is racing ahead on AI for absolutely sure. I know in this side of the world, we are predominantly using your models, whether it's OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, Copilot, and the other big leader is China, also racing ahead. But how do you see the technology evolving in the years to come? Do you think that it's going to be embedded, like every police force is going to have a chatbot where instead of calling 911, we can just go into, New York police NYP chatbot and say, hey, I need some help over here?
I think there'll be some element of that. As I look now, I've talked to a bunch of people. I was just talking to a commander out in the West Coast, and they used AI with a drone to find a lost child. And I mean, there's a million stories like that. But the more you start to see those types of stories, the more people, I think, even the people that are apprehensive about it will start leaning into it. Obviously, the concern, like we said at the beginning, is fear of the unfamiliar. So as it becomes more familiar, and to use your term, the more ubiquitous that it's all around us, it's on every cell phone, right? You push the button, you talk. What time is this? Can you set an appointment for that? Get me a reservation for dinner. The more that everybody gets comfortable with it, I think it's going to really lower the barrier for that. I think the only X factor is the security angle, because obviously people are very anxious about that. But as I was just reading the story yesterday, that now we have these unmanned aircraft that are flying, with military applications, with bombs and stuff. I mean, the fact that we've made it to that point, like anything else, I think the technology hits the defense sector first and it kind of trickles down into regular society. So to see the wild advancements, the exponential advancements that are happening, I think they're inevitable. So it's not really a matter of whether you're willing to accept it or not. It's a matter of, are you willing to live in the new world? If you're the person that's still riding horses when everybody's driving cars, you're going to be left behind. So that was kind of my attitude was, I don't want to be one of those old age people like, what's this newfangled technology? Like harness it, learn to use it. Don't complain about it, because it's coming whether you like it or not.
I think very strongly that our colleagues working across government, public sector, policing, all aspects of society, there's a responsibility, as you say, because you have the domain expertise. I will continue to repeat myself until people get the message. What you bring with all of those decades of experience, that is necessary in order to leverage the technology. And we must share it, I believe, before we're gone. And that will be our legacy. There's a huge leadership role, right? I think the AI transformation is as much about leadership and people as it is about the technology. You must be seeing that on the stages and the rooms that you go into with the different opinions. But those that lead are those that are putting their hand up and saying, let's embrace it.
Yeah, like I said, you don't have a choice, because if you're in charge of a law enforcement agency and because I see this all the time. The last few years, when I talk to chiefs and sheriffs all over the country, in some, across the world, they all have the same concerns, right? It doesn't matter where you are. Every executive has a shortfall in manpower. They don't have enough staffing. They're being overburdened with tasks, right? Police departments are being asked to deal with all kinds of things that may not necessarily be law enforcement related. So they have more demands on their time, less people to do it. You don't have a choice, because at the end of the day, the public that you serve is demanding that you be able to provide these services. And if you're not doing it, and the next town over or the next county over is doing it, eventually you don't have a choice. So like I said, the trick is are you going to do it willingly and embrace it and learn how to harness the power of it? Or are you just going to be, dragged along? And I think a lot of people realize, especially having that younger generation that is more comfortable with the technology, they're okay with going, hey, run this thing, tell me what's going on here. As long as, because to your point, at the end of the day, all the AI can do is recombinate, reconfigure the information that you give it, So it doesn't know how to be a cop. It's never been in a firefight. It's never had, to make a death notification. It's never seen, all these awful things and experienced those things. So it can tell you that story because it read it on the internet and Googled it or whatever, but it's not the same thing. And I think that's the thing that people need to remember is, at the end of the day, AI is just recombining what you give it. it has no experience. It's not out here living in the world and going through these things. So it only knows what you tell it. And I think, at least for the foreseeable future, as much as AI is powerful, it's only powerful when in the right hands and when given the right input. So to your point, yeah, it requires leadership. It requires people that have that knowledge and that background, because all it can do is take that, learn from it, repackage it, and then apply it, but it can't create it from nothing. And I think that's a really important point to remember.
What do you think about our younger generations? We both have, teens and children in our lives, and you've got, you're seeing younger officers coming into the force and starting their career. How do you think they can adapt? Obviously, they're probably native, but how do they get the experience that we got by doing it the hard way, if you like?
I think they need to learn the stories and the lessons from people like you and I that have been there ahead of them. But I think them taking the technical expertise that they have and learning how to leverage it in a productive, in a safe way, I think is really going to be the future of law enforcement, whether we like it or not. At the end of the day, again, as much as I say that, I'm thinking back to all of my experiences. And again, when I'm walking a beat or when I'm on a call, people don't want to talk to a robot. Chatbots are cool to get an answer or maybe to get a copy of a police report. But if I'm having a problem with my neighbor, you're not going to send over the T2000, right, to go talk to that person and hear me and understand the problem that I'm experiencing. And, that human connection, I think, is a really important point, important part of what law enforcement officers do, is having the network and the relationships and being able to deal with people on a human level is an X factor that I don't know, as much as AI can learn, I think there are still certain limitations. And again, even if it was the most incredible robot in the world, a human being doesn't want to talk to a machine in those situations in many cases. They want to feel that human connection. At the end of the day, that's who we are. And I don't know that there'll ever be a replacement for that. But I am certainly excited for the prospect of what it can bring, especially when I think about things like cold cases, and a lot of the other applications that can really, really leverage it. Because again, even in my department, I was in a very large capital city police department. And only up until recently did we have the ability to have someone handle cold cases. So what does that mean? If you got murdered in the 80s and nobody solved the crime, now what? To be able to pump that information in, it can lead to new leads. It can lead to solving new crimes. Never mind, the technical advances with DNA and fingerprints and those types of things. But I think, back to your original question, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you embrace this? Again, I understand the fear, the concerns. Certainly, like even with the flock cameras, that for those that aren't aware, they're basically traffic cameras that are posted all over the place. And, people have privacy concerns because they say, wait a minute, I'm driving around on the road. You're recording, it records a lot of data points, your license plate, all the aspects of your vehicle. And obviously it's very valuable when the time comes, but I can certainly understand why some people have concerns about where is that data stored? How is it being used? And I think that's the real secret for law enforcement, is the transparency. I've heard that term be thrown around a lot, but it's really, really important. The places that I have seen AI be successful, the departments messaged it, they explained it ahead of time. They told people what they were doing, why they were doing it. And those places seem to have a much, much higher rate of success with less pushback from people, as opposed to others that either they weren't very clear about what they were doing or how they were doing it, or worse, someone found out after the fact of data is being used without their knowledge. And that's what you don't want, because it really comes down to trust. So if you have that level of trust from the outset, and own it, right? Is sometimes things go wrong. Just say that, what, hey, this is what happened. We're learning as we go. But I think people can appreciate the value of what it does and the value that it returns, as long as it's just like a gun, right? As long as it's being used properly in the right hands and for the right reasons, for protection, of property and life, then I think people are much more apt to relent to it, because at the end of the day, who doesn't want better police service? And especially in a society where, the real nuts and bolts of it is if you want more cops, you got to have more tax money, right? And who wants to reallocate money there when it could be better spent? And the same thing with police officers, because you know what? I can speak for myself. You know how many hours I would spend writing reports and, doing administrative tasks that I wasn't on the street. I wasn't out there helping people. I think there's a lot of value to it as long as it's done the proper way. Like I said, message it out, make sure that you let people know what you're doing, how you're handling that information, how you're protecting that information, when you're going to use it, and then show the success stories. Show the we found a missing kid, or we solved this old murder, or whatever the case might be. Like I said, with the Brown University mass shooter, that was a really big deal. And so even for people that push back against it, when those types of things happen, it's really tough to argue against it. So again, it's like something that is really combustible. It's as long as it's used properly and it's used with the right intent in mind, and it's handled appropriately. I think there's no way you can deny that that's the wave of the future.
You've just summed up what Alex Murray, the executive director of Police AI in the UK, said in last week's conversation. And he said, Joanne, we don't do AI, we do responsible AI.
I love that. And he answered the question even better than I could. And like you said, it's a wave of the future. You got to harness it and ride that wave, because it's solving a lot of problems all at the same time. It's making police forces more efficient, more effective, more cost effective. And at the end of the day, again, having been a career police officer, that's less burnout, that's less stress, right? It makes your life better, right? It takes a lot less out of you when you don't have to do all those types of things. And it makes you feel better because you're out there doing what you're supposed to do, helping people, because that's really what we're here to do at the end of the day. So I think it's an amazing tool as long as it's wielded properly, and it's changing the world. It really is. And it's making everybody's life better, even police. And that's an amazing thing.
Well, I cannot let you go without giving me the Irish backstory, because with a name like Sean Carroll, you can't deny it. And you did hint to us during our conversation that there was lineage there. So I want to know, and I'm sure my listeners want to know also.
Yes. Well, as my grandfather used to say, I spell my name Sean, and as he would say, the right way. Sean Michael Carroll, yes, is very Irish. And I found my roots. I actually found out that my great-grandfather off the boat from Ireland was a police officer in the early 1900s. It was like 1902, 1903. They only had one document with his name on it. And I had several other people, including my father, through the years. And so it's funny because of all the training I did with the FBI National Academy Associates. I'll travel the country. The one thing I never got to do was to go across the pond and go back to my home country. And now, as you mentioned, having kids, and I have my first granddaughter, and I just found out on Father's Day that we have another grandchild on the way, Irish twins, as it were, 8 months apart. We're super excited. I want to bring my family there and show them where we're from. I've talked to a lot of people that have done it, and it's just a life-changing experience. So I'm excited, and I would love to be able to meet you in person as well during that opportunity.
Well, we should try and absolutely make it happen. I am absolutely sure that there's definitely a stage in Ireland that needs to hear from you. So I will keep my eyes and ears open. Congratulations on the second grandchild. As a grandmother of two, I know the excitement of it, and it is, they all say, it's a wonderful time in your career. But just to let people know, we're still very young, Sean and I.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you're not watching this, don't be painting a picture that suggests that we're older than we sound. We're absolutely not.
Exactly right. Because yes, I will be out there playing with my grandkids and not in a wheelchair. So I'm very proud to have that opportunity. I can't wait.
Well, listen, thank you so much once again for your time. I know you're going off to a series of day-long meetings in Washington. Thanks for your insights and continued success.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And if anybody needs to find me, they can also find me at AIO. It's AIOleadership.com, or on LinkedIn, it's Sean M. Carroll. Or you can just email me directly, my initials SC at AIOleadership.com, and I'm available. Or as I said, Sean Carroll with 2 R's and 2 L's speaks. SeanCarrollSpeaks.com is the keynote place. So I would really love to connect with anybody. And if there's anything I can do to help, it's my pleasure to pay it forward. And
we'll absolutely put those links in the show notes for the podcast too.
Thank you so much, Joanne. It really has been a pleasure and an honor to be here with you, and so excited to continue the conversation with others. So please continue to do what you do as, being a trailblazer and a pioneer to really pave the way for people like me right behind you. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to watching your continued success.
Thank you, my friend. Have a great day.
You too. My pleasure. Bye-bye.